And today I'm speaking with Patrick Edmond from Altair, and he is an advisory board member for the Sustainable Aviation Futures EU Congress, which is taking place in Amsterdam from the 21st to the 23rd of May. Today, we're hoping to get a very quick snapshot of insights from Patrick in terms of some of his background, a little bit on the industry, and also some of the sessions that he'll be participating in during the Congress. So thanks very much for joining us today, Patrick.
I'm very happy to be here, Jamie.
I'd like to just kick things off to give people a better sense of who you are. Could you share a brief background about yourself and also your work in the aviation space with Altair?
Yes, of course. So a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, I trained as an engineer and then came into the aviation business. My background in aviation stretches over 20 plus years, mostly on the commercial and strategy side for airlines and also airports. So developing new airline networks, working with airports on route development, on strategy, on developing aerospace clusters and so on. And over the last few years, sustainability has become more important for all of us, but it was becoming very clear to me that this was going to be central to the future of the aviation industry. So about 6 years ago, I set up my own consultancy firm, Altair Advisory, to focus on strategy and sustainability for the aviation industry. And over the last couple of years in particular, the sustainability part of that has really taken center stage. So I see a great deal of different projects underway at the moment across the board, from OEMs, from original equipment manufacturers, through to airports, through to airlines, and of course a lot of work around developing new technology for SAF, for electric aircraft, for hydrogen aircraft, and so on. So there's a great deal happening, and there's a very strong recognition within the industry that sustainability is central to the ability of aviation to continue to grow. So I'm very happy to be able to play a role in that. I'm advising policymakers, manufacturers, airports, and others about how they can plan out a path for the future.
It sounds like you're a very busy man. So thank you also for helping us and being part of the advisory board for the Congress as well. We do appreciate your time. I think there's one thing I specifically wanted to ask you, because I know that it's something you're quite passionate about. ReFuelEU Aviation it's on the horizon. It's coming up fast, very fast. And what I wanted to ask you is if you think there are any remaining uncertainties around it that we can provide more clarity on during the Congress this May.
You're absolutely right that the obligations of ReFuelEU Aviation are coming up really fast. We have a 2% blend mandate starting next year, and we've seen a flurry of announcements of offtake agreements, for example, as airlines in Europe prepare to meet those obligations. I think in many ways we're fortunate that we have a relatively well-defined policy in Europe compared to many other parts of the world. What we're going to see over the next year or so is obviously some uncertainty about how it's actually going to work out in practice. And I think there's still going to be some discussion around SAF allowances, the scheme for dealing with remote airports and so on. And I think what we're also going to see is a lot more discussion over the next year or two about whether book and claim can be integrated or should be integrated into Fit for 55 and ReFuelEU Aviation, and also whether the European emissions trading scheme is going to be extended beyond the borders of Europe. And that's something else that's under study at the moment. So it could become even more influential in terms of setting global policy for aviation decarbonization. So I think there's going to be a lot to talk about at the conference.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with you. Perhaps the question should have been, are there any certainties around it that we could provide clarity on? So it sounds like there's plenty to talk about, and a lot of these we'll be covering at the Congress as well. We're delighted to confirm that the European Commission will be giving a keynote address during the main conference day 1-2 to hopefully, give a bit more sense of what's happening in that respect, and whether there is a bit of a grace period when it comes in next year as well. Hopefully that would be the case.
I think you're right, Jamie, and I think that the Congress is very well timed to allow both the policymakers from the Commission and also those who are working towards hitting those deadlines to get together and share experience. So I think from that point of view, we're getting very close to the rubber hitting the road for the initial tranche of blending obligations, and I think it'll be a good point to take stock.
Yep, absolutely. Oh, fantastic. Well, I'm glad to hear we're well positioned. And You're also going to be speaking at the Congress, and in particular, you're moderating one session I wanted to sort of draw on. It's focusing on, it's actually an airline sustainability roundtable where we're bringing together a lot of sustainability heads from different airlines. And they're going to share some quick fire perspectives, a little bit like this interview, on the pathways to aviation decarbonization. Perhaps a question for you, and maybe something that will be drawn on during the sort of panel. What's something concrete that you think could be done in the next 12 months to drive some serious actions in terms of moving the needle a little bit in terms of decarbonization in the aviation sector?
I think what we're seeing happen already is quite promising, which is that there's a move away from greenwashing in terms of the airline industry's discourse, if you like, and more of an acceptance of the realities here. What I mean by that is a number of senior aviation industry figures over the last year have said things like, we need to decarbonize because we won't have a social license to continue growing. In other words, we won't have public acceptance or policymaker acceptance to continue growing unless we can show we're decarbonizing. We had the recently retired CEO of Amsterdam Schiphol Airport a few days ago saying we may need to pause growth until we sort out decarbonization. We've seen similar remarks from the head of Rome Airport, and a number of airline CEOs have been talking about this as well. So I think the airlines are recognizing that they can't continue a business as usual approach, and they have to actually start paying more serious attention to how to decarbonize. SAF is a huge part of that, but it's not the only part. It's also about thinking of how do we grow the industry? Should we grow the industry? What is the role for policy to reduce emissions? One of the questions that I ask any of the airline CEOs I'm talking to is, when do you expect your total emissions to peak and start coming down? Because everybody is targeting net zero by 2050. We can talk about having more and more efficient aircraft, but if we're having more and more of those aircraft, the total emissions are still going up. So each airline needs to have a sense of when are they actually turning the corner and starting to reduce those emissions. So I think over the next 12 months, we're going to see perhaps a more honest kind of rhetoric from airlines about what needs to happen.
Yeah, I'd absolutely agree with you. I had another interview recently with Claudia Hugel from Lufthansa, and her key point, the matter that she was most interested in was greenwashing, and they're bringing out a fact sheet as well in the next sort of few weeks to months too. So when you have a sort of leading airline directly talking about having to avoid greenwashing, obviously then it's become part of the regular discourse, and it's really good to see how that can translate into actual decarbonization in the industry as well. Patrick, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your insights and your input. And yeah, look forward to catching up in person and hearing from your sessions in Amsterdam this May as well.
Looking forward to it, Jamie. Thanks a million for your time this morning.